I believe that heritage is the thing on which the present is built. And I think that for Bangkok is very important. We have very, very deep intertwined history. And all of that comes together through this heritage in Bangkok. Why are European heritage buildings important in Thailand? Well, they are important just like any other heritage, but I think they really show the cosmopolitan nature of first Siam and later on Thailand. The presence of Europeans here, the way how our cultures have not intertwined but met, have maybe blended together in certain ways. Plots of land were given to European embassies or consulates first, and you started building on that. So this is so much in the heart of the history of the city that it is important to highlight that, and it's important really to look at these buildings as well. So for me, showing and showcasing this sort of European presence in the history and development of this wonderful metropolis is very dear to my heart.
So today we are visiting two ambassadors' residences on Chao Phraya River. They are very remarkable as the two of the very oldest foreign embassies in the city. And we are now in Bang Rak. That was the only access from the world to Bangkok when Siam was opened up to the European countries in the early 19th century. So the king granted the lands to all these European countries to settle their consulates and embassies. And many of them were here well through the 20th century. And now only Portugal and France still maintain their residences and embassies here after 150 years.
The existence of the embassy itself, this house itself, symbolizes the relations between Thailand and Portugal. The house was built in a land which was a present from His Majesty the King of Thailand to the King of Portugal in the 19th century. The Portuguese managed to build the house, which was first was a consulate, then it was transformed in an embassy. It's the first foreign embassy in Bangkok, so we are very proud of that. And it shows the continuity of a very long relation that started already in the 16th century throughout the times until today.
This is the typical bungalow from the mid-19th century, but this particular one was constructed in 1875 and it was designed by an Italian architect. The name was Joachim Grazzi. You can see that the upper floor is taller than the lower floor because at the time the lower floor was used for office and the living space is on the upper floor. It's very simple design, boxes of rooms with veranda on the front. One common feature is the use of strict symmetry. So you can see that the form is very simple. So this is the interior of the bungalow, and we are now sitting in the veranda space, which opens directly to Chao Phraya River. The space is very open, so all the windows and doors, they can be opened to allow the breeze to come through, and they can be closed to protect the room inside from the harsh sun of the west side. Another unique feature of this house is the staircase. Typically for the bungalows, the staircase would be on the exterior, but for this house, it was used and designed by Europeans. So they didn't care about the sacredness of the height, and they were able to put the staircase right in the center of the house. So this is probably the oldest house that I can think of that have this interior staircase inside the house.
Well, the embassy before was together in the residence. In the floor there was the embassy and upstairs was the residence. And then it was not very comfortable because you have to separate things. Then we thought there is this beautiful warehouse which we did not want to destroy because it's a sort of what we call industrial architecture. We saved the house and we transformed it. We didn't want to build a new one. It was not the case to build a huge embassy, but the space was okay. It just had to be somehow transformed. So that is basically the reason we wanted to keep it. Regarding the wall, which was indicates the limits of the Portuguese property, some years ago we had famous artist, his name is Vils. He offered this mural, but actually we put it outside so that all the Thais can benefit from it. So actually it's a present for everyone. You're going to look at it with different eyes. And every day there are people in front of the mural to be photographed. I'm very happy also to have this display of Portuguese art just in front of the embassy. Feeling and working in an embassy like this, which is such an historical monument in Bangkok, it's also being the focus of a permanent attention actually, because every time I go out there are tourists in front of the door and they like to know what is going on here. And it's a sense of pride. The house represents the relations between Portugal and Thailand. Secondly, I represent my country, so I feel very happy to be in such an important place. And thirdly, it's a big responsibility because you have to keep the house going and the materials are very old. We keep things exactly as they were. We don't want to change. It has to look as it was always. So it's a little responsibility in terms of conservation, but it's and maintenance, but it's a pleasure and it's a challenge, a daily challenge.
Apart from the Portuguese Embassy, another very interesting building is the French Embassy. So these two embassies are two of the oldest in the city, and they remain here in Bang Rak as heritage buildings. This beautiful plot of land was given to the French government by King Roman IV. Originally, there was a building that was used by the European custom officer because there was the custom house just next door. And that was transformed into the first consulate. And the consulate became a legation in 1888, an embassy in 1949. 160 years later, it still stands here, right on the Chao River.
Well, the Heritage Embassy of France in Thailand is very important for several reasons. First of all, it shows the relation between France and Thailand. As you know, this residence is very ancient. We were installed here in the 19th century, but obviously the relation between Siam and France is much more ancient. It's the place where we receive all our guests. It's very important to receive them in this specific context. We want to honor them. We are very proud to be in this heritage building.
The house was much expanded in around 1880s, probably by Joachim Grazzi, the Italian architect. Significant features include the strict symmetry, the use of classical forms like the arches, the open staircase in the front that leads up to the main veranda on the upper floor. So on the veranda we have three significant features. One is the marble floor, and the second is the railing, which is classical in detail for the balustrades. And the third feature is the gingerbread feature on the eaves, which marks it as dating from the 1880s. This is the Grand Salon. This is probably the oldest part of the house that was probably built in around 1850s. As you could see that the ceiling height is very tall, and that leads to the use of the decorative grills above all the doors and windows. And towards the back, there was the extension of the dining room, which was built in around 1905. After 170 years, this remains the French ambassador's residence, even though his office is moved elsewhere nearby, but this house remains as the residence. So it's very important in the Thai architectural history as the house that has been continually lived for all these years.
First of all, I have to say that this residence is not per se the residence of the French ambassador. It's the residence of France in Bangkok. It means that it's open every day. And then, once a year, in September, we open up the gates, the doors of a residence, so everybody from the French community is able to visit this residence, which is part of our heritage in Thailand.
After almost 2 centuries, the embassies of France and Portugal remains here on the Chao Phraya River. Bang Rak itself had grown considerably from a port of Bangkok to the heart of the central business district. So the city has expanded, but the buildings remain the heritage for the generations to come.
The city is changing, and what I think for the future is so important is that the city doesn't change drastically but develops, building on layers, building on heritage, preserving that heritage and building the modernization around that heritage and not instead of it. So I hope that that inspiration will be there. People will feel what a wonderful place. That inspiration of preserving and enjoying this area and remembering how Europe has been present here for a long time as a friend, not as a foe, not as a colonizer, but really as a partner. And I think Bang Rak really shows that partnership and how it developed.